Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I am so excited today to introduce somebody who I met. We were just working on the timelines here. It's been about 2.5 years or 1.5 years since I first was introduced to Lauren Rainbow, a New England medium. I first heard her on the John Holland show because I was a Hay House fanatic and I was listening to all the shows. And I first heard about Lauren Rainbow on that show, and I was really drawn to her voice. And at the end of the show, she said, well, I'm actually going to Vancouver. And of course, my mind just was blown. I was like, she's coming to Vancouver? So I immediately went to the website. I booked tickets for me and my parents. My parents are always down to come see mediums with me. They have been since I was 17 years old, taking me to Sylvia Brown when I was a teenager and all these amazing mediums. And it was a funny night for us because it was literally up the street from where we were born, like third generation born, and we went to the wrong church. And we were standing outside the wrong church forever. We're like, what is going on? Like, where is this? And I was frustrated because I'm a Virgo, right? And so I was like, we need to be on time. So we ended up making it to the right church, and we're talking January 2018, I think or 18 is when we figured it out. And we were the last to arrive. We were the very back row. I was like a little bit mad at my parents. I was like, oh my God, we're late. Wanted to be front row. And out walked this bigger than life, beautiful being, just coming out on stage, just so confident in her light. I was like, my jaw was dropped. I was like, she's so confident. And my family actually got 3 readings that night, including me. Do you remember reading for me, Lauren?
I do. I don't remember the message, but I remember at the time after we connected. Yes.
I know. So I wanted to set that up because, the people who listen to Spirit School know how much fear I've overcome to even get where I am today in my spiritual practice, in my abilities. And you were a big part of me seeing what was possible, because I've always wanted to do demonstrations, but I was always really scared. And we'll get more into that as we go through the episode. But just seeing you fully in your power, just rocking the hell out of it, it just gave me so much confidence just through seeing you work. So I just wanted to say thank you, Lauren Rainbow, for coming on Spirit School. Let us know a little bit about you, how you serve the world of spirit, and what lights you up.
Oh my God. Well, thank you, Danielle. That was an amazing introduction. And I do remember you coming up after and having a conversation and, telling me that you were developing medium. So I was like, oh my God, it's amazing to be here. So thank you. Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah.
A little bit about myself. Oh my God, there's so much to start with, but as you've already kind of talked about, I am a medium, a psychic medium. I do sacred travels. I bring people around the world to sacred places for inspirational, life-opening, life-aware journeys. And I do my best always to serve spirit from a place of love, from a place of evidence and love. Is really where I think my overall mission as a medium has been, is to bring the evidence of spirit forward, but also the loving support and acknowledgement of how we're moving through this world. So that's really short form.
Yeah.
It's been almost 20 years in this work fully.
Wow.
Which is really mind-blowing. I started my journey as very fascinating. Obviously, I think we're all born in a way knowing that there's something going on. I think we all journey through our younger years, either very aware, somewhat aware, lightly aware. I can go into my childhood experiences, strange things happened.
Yeah.
But really what happened to me, I think that was most fascinating, is I was just drawn to sacred sites in the world from a young child. I was drawn to psychic intuition as a teenager. I really had a shift of awakening the day before 9/11 happened. I was laid off from my job. And just before that, and by the way, I was living in a retired funeral home at the time. Some people who know my story. I used to work for a newspaper called The Messenger, where I covered death and dying. And then I ended up leaving that job to move into a retired funeral home where I was near Salem, Massachusetts, and started kind of getting a little bit more into spirituality. I lost my job the day before 9/11, and then I ended up at a metaphysical shop the day after 9/11. and I have been on this journey ever since. So that's really, I think, what started this for me in my 20s. And since 2001, it's been a journey of service, and an evolving journey of service for sure.
Can you believe that was 20 years ago?
20 years ago.
Wow. I know. I'm just like doing the math in my head. I'm like, she's right. I'm like, wow, it's like 20 years ago. So I'm kind of fascinated about this too, because I just took my end of life doula training last December, and my life is not quite set up to be a doula because I have really young children. So being on call does not work for my family. But did you ever feel a calling to kind of get into that work? That's interesting that you covered death and dying. It's one of my favorite topics, obviously, as a medium. Like, what was that experience like for you? Did you get to interview people like at end of life, or was it people just coming through grief?
Well, for me as a journalist, as a newspaper journalist, the covering of death and dying was actually not, I did one story of a woman, a series at that time that was very much like a Tuesdays with Maury.
Right. Yeah.
If you're familiar with that book, it had just come out, and, was a journey of someone, going through illness. And so I met with a woman every day. I won an award actually for the article on her journey of life. And I think about that now going, oh my God, I even forgot about that. That's a whole other lifetime.
Totally.
But the messenger and being a journalist for me was, it's amazing how I think to mediumship, we can be called in many different ways to serve, right? For you, as far as giving, we, as a medium, we do the evidential messages, that kind of piece. But then there can be like the end of life doula call, for example. For me, my calling has always been to tell the stories of those whose stories may not get said. And that's part of what I even do in my own messaging from spirit. It's not just the evidence. Yes, here's the evidence of who they are, but what was their life about? That's the message, isn't it? Not just who were they evidentially, but let's really get to the core of what their life is about, because that's our life is our message. So being a journalist, my calling to be a journalist was to write those stories of people whose messages needed to be heard. I ended up as a journalist in hard news, which is the death and dying side. That's like, crime scenes, which weirdly also set me up for mediumship. It gave me tools to interview spirit. So it was training me to be a medium before I even trained as a medium, because I had all these tools of interviewing. I just had to move it from the living to the spirit world, right?
You probably have a boatload of references for how people die.
Well, exactly too. When you're on, I was in Vermont, which is a very northern part of our country, very much in the backwoods. You wouldn't believe what goes on in the country of some places.
I bet.
There's a lot of different things you see, but exactly, it gave me, for anybody who's a developing medium who listens, these are the things that give us the points of references that make us unique mediums.
That's what I say. I said, the prerequisite to mediumship is a well-lived life. Really.
True.
It's like, because it's all about your references. And if you stay in spiritual context, if you stay in spiritual books, it's like you're limiting your references. Like you have to live life. You have to read something else, experience something else to kind of build those references, right?
Yep.
So then let me ask you something. I didn't know I was going here, Lauren, but let me ask you this too. Do you ever feel drawn to do like investigation, like psychic investigation work?
So that's a great question. I did one once, and here we are, the journey of a medium, and I scared myself. And I realized that for those who do the criminal work, and God bless anyone who wants to go in that journey, do it. If you're called to it, to do, because I think there's now, especially in this modern day world, an even bigger call to bring those worlds together. But you have to have a really strong soul and mind to be like a first responder in some way. I think as a medium yourself, Danielle, you understand that the visions and the things that we see to interpret things. So when you're on a crime scene and you're in the middle of, allowing your clairvoyant eye, I think those who do that work so well are very grounded and, very direct and know how to go into the fire. And it wasn't my calling. I loved doing it, and I did help, and I do help when I am called, but it's not when I felt guided for me to dive into. I think that's a specific work for the right mind, if that makes sense. And that's why I say, if you've got that criminal energy and you want to go for it, there's work to be done there. And it's a wonderful work to step into, but I think you have to have a good solid ground. It wasn't my calling.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did a workshop with Tony Stockwell in 2016, and he had us spend a whole day on some investigations that he was working on. And I was like, I couldn't do this work. Like one of them was a missing 3-year-old boy. And my heart would just break. I don't think I could quite do that work. I don't think that I'm called to that either. But I interviewed Mediumfleur a couple months ago, and she's actually going to get her degree in forensic science because she really does want to work with police departments to help solve crimes. I'm like, wow, like I definitely think it's like a calling, right?
And
So
she's
yeah.
definitely that amazing kind of evidential medium who has that, I think your gift too represents who you are and how to use it. Working with Fleur in the past as well, she's very, amazing with that clear cut evidence and vision, and has that strong grounding Tony as well, having studied with Tony. So that's why I say for people, for like both of those beautiful souls, the work is there to be done.
Yeah.
For anyone who's called into it. I just think it's understanding your calling in this work, and honoring that path, right? So for me, I've done it and it was great, but I almost scared myself. And I was like, I don't know if I have the emotional balance that I need to be strong in that work.
Yeah, I get a lot of messages on Facebook from people looking for their pets, and I'm just like, I don't know. Like I don't think I work like that. And so, and it's very high risk too, obviously, right? It's like it's already, you're pretty courageous putting yourself out there, like saying the evidence that you get in mediumship period, but when the stakes are so high, like I know for me, 7 years into my development, I'm like, that might be a bit too high for me right now. Those stakes might be a little bit too high. So totally get it, but that's very fascinating. Thank you so much. And so I really wanted to ask you too. So the spiritual travel thing I found really fascinating because it wasn't until I started following you. And I know that when I saw you in January 2018, you had just come back from a trip to India because I was like following you. So I've never been a travel person because I worked for race car teams when I was really young. And so I traveled all the time when I was younger. Now the last place I want to be is like an airport or like lost luggage and all this kind of stuff. But I really have been drawn to like go visit places like Mount Shasta. I'm really interested in the chakra centers of the earth. So what do you get out of these spiritual journeys and how does that fill you up? And you lead people through them too. So what does that look like?
Spiritual journeys for me is a different part of the calling inside of, I often say as a medium, we often have different avenues in which we focus. Like we were talking a second ago about people who work in the criminal side and helping solve cases. For me, I've always been a little bit more of the woo. I'm very evidential as a medium, which is my realistic side, but then there's a part of me that's spiritual a little bit more as we dive into the woo here, really connected to the sacred earth. And, I do a lot of work in shamanic development as well in my energy, which I think is a sister attribute to being a medium. So the medium is as we're in between worlds, and the word shaman is one who walks between worlds. So for me, the soul of connecting to the earth, like you're saying, the chakras of the earth, working with the energies within to activate aspects of our soul to achieve even higher frequencies of vibration, vibrational states.
Yeah.
So I believe that there are really powerful sacred places that I have been to around this world. We'll talk simply about, for example, Egypt, the Great Pyramids of Giza. Everybody knows those. The Great Sphinx. Having been inside those pyramids, the power and the frequency inside these places can shift you, can raise your energy and your vibration. And I think for me, that's part of my journey has always been in the healing sides and healing training as well. And seeing mediumship even as a healing tool, that we're not only healing the living and offering love and support, but we're also even healing and raising the vibration of spirit when communication happens, right? So when we're out on these sites, what we do is we connect to the energy of the sacred lands, perhaps, the guides of those lands. Sometimes, like when I bring people to Peru, we sit with real shamans and, do sacred ceremonies and shift in frequency. I've been inside, like I said, the Giza Plateau. We create really special magical journeys too. Egypt is, our own private boat with private visits to these sites where we have Egyptologists and guides that give us opportunity to not only learn about the land, but to work and do little ceremonies around these areas as well. India is a fascinating place because it itself, I say, is just living living, to just walk in India is to be activated because they're just a living spiritual culture. So, bringing people to these sacred lands is life-changing. It gives you a whole new view of the world. It gives you a different view of the spiritualities of the world.
Yeah.
I find that when people come back from these journeys, the groups that we've led, they take off in many different ways. They quit jobs and go in, and successfully go into different directions, and or relocate because they've been waiting to make changes. They feel more enlightened and grounded, and usually come back. We often have the groups communicate with each other in our little group circle every day for like months, and missing you guys, so we create family too. And we've had some folks now that are traveling. I have one that's traveled almost on every journey I've done.
Wow.
So it also creates a sense of family, but change. So the sacred journeys are really powerful for that.
That is so cool. And I have a lot of listeners who are into the shamanic work as well as mediumship. So this will really speak to them. I know it will. And I want to ask you something too, because what do you feel about the energy of Vancouver? I know it does not compare to the Sphinx or like the pyramids or anything like that, but I have heard on different podcasts so many different spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle, Caroline Myss, like they say that there's like something to the energy of Vancouver. Did you feel that when you came here?
It's interesting that you say that, because when I was in Vancouver, I rented a car and I drove up even around the coast. And the first thing I thought was like, is this where they recorded the Goonies? As you're looking up and you see the little islands, and I'm like, I feel like, waiting for the pirate ship to come by.
They very well could have. We're known as Hollywood North, so they very well could have.
It's gorgeous though. And when I was walking on one of the trails just north of the city, in with the massive, beautiful trees and everything, and there is definitely, for me, a very native frequency in that land. It was honorable and it was gorgeous. And, when, the shaman side, where I can tune, when you walk through the woods, you turn into the frequencies of the as I say, the guardians of the land. And I definitely felt old, I'll go a little blue and say Lemurian-like energies out there. So I think you've got some beautiful ancient frequencies that are wonderful luminous beings, as well as some very native earthy energy in Vancouver. So it was gorgeous to me and definitely sacred.
I love that. Okay. Yeah. Cause I've heard people explain it. It's like, there's something just about the energy just being so open here. Like the people are open, the energy's open, like people can work with ease here. Right. Whereas I know people who've gone to Australia, and Australia is wonderful, but it's like a different kind of like energy as far as like openness in this kind of work. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting. So I kind of want to take you back to your development path. So like, I know when I knew I was a medium and I had that first mediumship experience when I was 31, the rest of my life made sense. I was like, I've actually been experiencing this my whole life. But when you transitioned out of your journalist into this mediumship path, what was that first connection for you? What was that first experience for you? And what did your development path look like after that?
Oh, wow. That's a big one, right? That's good. My first real connection with spirit that I realized something phenomenal was happening. I was living in the funeral home. I was waking up in the morning, and I would have, just as you shift from sleeping to wake, when you're in that perfect space, right? The in-between, spirit would come in my room every day and sit with me. And I would have what I think a lot of people experience as a paralysis, a form of freezing energy, where my body could not seem to move while the energy of the spirit was in my presence. After a bit of time, that would shift, and the spirit would shift. And that would happen every single morning for almost 6 months while I lived in this house. And that was pre to the 9/11 shift. That was coming up to 9/11. And it was so visceral. It was a little bit scary too, because that's when I always say, when you really step in the presence of something energetically beyond you for the first time, and it's that physical, it is intimidating. I think I felt intimidated because I can't see it in the real form. I can see it, I can feel it, but I can't,
Yeah.
and you're like, what is going on here? And so, at that same time, I had ironically, synchronistically, had already become curious even more into understanding spirit anyway. As I said, I was not too far from Salem, Mass, so I was going in all the time and bought my first deck of cards, tarot cards to read, and was finding that I had this really natural intuition. And so I just naturally kind of, for those first 6 months that spirit was with me, I kind of just naturally felt it. And then after 9/11 happened, like I said, I ended up at this metaphysical shop. And for 4 years, Danielle, I was gifted Reiki attunements. I was gifted the entire Reiki series, and IET, and integrated energy therapy, Shambhala Reiki, you name it. In that early 2000s, all of those healing systems, magnified healing, I was gifted attunement after attunement after attunement to help run this space. So I was kind of like, literally, spirit went from, okay, you just lost your job. Here is a spiritual family who's taking you in, and every day we're doing these initiations and activations. And so I had this huge esoteric training in the beginning, and I was the only medium in the group. So I'm actually surrounded by a bunch of healers raising energy and frequency, and I'm the only one who's trying to play with communicating with spirit. I didn't even know Arthur Finley, for example, existed. I didn't know that there was any such thing as mediumship, that it was something, because my teaching was so esoteric. I knew John Edward was on TV with Crossing Over, so I would watch him and go, oh, I think I can do that, and then I'd sit down and do that in a reading with what I was feeling, so I was really self-taught in the beginning. I was not floundering, but I just kind of went out there and just did it, figured it out, and I started to build a psychic mediumship, business here as out of metaphysical shops and house parties before Facebook existed and you did social media marketing. You were word of mouth. I built all word of mouth. I was busy. I had an amazing, word of mouth energy here. That moved to the stage in 2008, where I met, again, spirit's amazing. I ended up working as a box office manager in a theater as a job because they needed extra money. And I met a guy who was like, I manage, these events, and I think you've got a funny laugh and a personality, and I know you can talk to dead people. Can I put you on stage and see what happens? And I'm like, what is it? So I even did a Danielle, before I even knew what a demonstration for spirit was.
I love this so much.
And so I then met John Holland, who was an amazing blessing in my life. And I took my first mediumship development class. It was advanced, and I went, oh my God, there's a whole system to this. So it's like, okay, I gotta, and so it was really self-taught. It was a lot of self-taught. I kind of have to admit, in those first 4 years, I was just doing what was there, and it just opened up. And so, but I started Demming in Spirit in 2008, and then that just grew into a whole different ballgame. So I didn't always have that confidence you talked about in the beginning.
Well, and this is what I wanted to ask, because this is very unique for me. I only have read one other medium who was self-taught. I mean, I don't know all the mediums in the world, but Laura Lynn Jackson, who's also on the East Coast, like, she's a medium who she's never been mentored. She just like figured it out. I only know that because I've read her book, The Light Between Us. But this is really fascinating to me because I was also interviewing Jonathan, the medium, this week, who was the last guest on the podcast. And he said he didn't actually start feeling like insecure about his gifts until he started being mentored, because then the comparison kind of comes in. Then you start to like question yourself. So I really like the purity of you just allowing spirit to be your guide, spirit to be your teacher for like those first 4 years. Because I try to tell like a lot of my students, like, don't try to hop from teacher to teacher to teacher. It's like, let spirit be your teacher for a while, especially like in between that integration kind of phase, right? I really like that. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it was interesting. I agree with Jonathan. I felt better in naturally my gift before I started training.
Yes.
And then I realized, like I said, I'm like, oh my God. And so I took the training really more as a way to better myself as a teacher, because I was also teaching mediumship before I was trained, from my own natural way of working. I had just figured it out. And I wanted to get better as a teacher. I wanted to understand more the language of mediumship, what a link and a blend, and then I was blessed because through my connections, I started to study with folks like Tony Stockwell and James Prague and working with John Holland. So I got a really amazing, it was kind of like the first 4 years of being blessed with, just all this energy training. Then Spirit went, okay, let's give you some really good mentoring. But I also had to be careful to not undo what was already natural in me. Because I did find, like I'm sure Jonathan experienced, I went to Arthur Finley in 2011, and I came back and I was doing a work with John, and I went up on stage. He put me up on stage and said, give a message, and I said okay, and I had gotten into this very straight-laced British style of delivering, because I love Arthur Finley. They do train you well, but they also train you in a very strict way, very and afterwards John came up to me and goes, can I have your personality back now?
I know, and I noticed that because I've studied under a lot of Arthur Finley teachers, and I never considered myself a spiritualist in any way because I always felt like it was a bit in a box, right? And it's like I didn't like being put in that kind of box, but I feel like we're kind of busting out of that now, like the evolution of mediumship. I think people are just kind of like, I've been seeing that even in the past 7 years I've been in this, I've been seeing like this evolvement of mediumship into this more multidisciplinary, a little bit more personalized style of reading, right? So I love that. That is so fascinating. And I know that like you do work closely with John Holland. That's how I discovered you. And I know that you just released a deck with him, like you collaborated on a deck. So tell us a bit about this.
Yeah. Oh, actually, hold on. I think I do have it. Like, I should have one ready, right? So I'm so excited. So this is our mediumship training deck.
Yes.
And John has just been a beautiful, synchronistic gift to me. This is the other thing I just want to, before we dive fully into this too, I'll just share this with you, Danielle, is, for those of you on the journey of development and spirit, I always say this: show up to the work and be completely of service. A lot of people are like, how did you meet John? How did this all connect? And the way we connected is I busted my butt in New England working. I built a name for myself working. And I love this story. John and I love this story. I was working, teaching a class at this little place called Circles of Wisdom in Massachusetts. And he was doing a dem in the big room, and I was teaching a little class. And he had a sold out event and walks into my room almost 11 years ago now, I think we were talking. And he's like, who are you? And he's like, wait, you're the teacher here tonight. I said, yes. And he's like, I'm John. I'm like, I know.
Like, I know who you are, John.
He's like, well, nice to meet you, Ms. Rainbow, and then he walked out of the room, and I'm like, I had that, like, oh my God. And then the next month we were in the same situation. He was demming in this big classroom, and I went, and he comes back and he goes, was almost like, he was like, you again, and then we just kind of forged a connection, and he's been a beautiful gift. But by showing up and doing the work, by serving spirit to the best that you can, and doing it sometimes in the nittiest and grittiest of ways, is how you build your connection, and spirit will bring you the blessing. So we created the mediumship training deck, 50 cards, Danielle. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
And it's all mediumship training techniques. So we do say it's not an oracle deck, but with this gorgeous imagery, some of that's one of the cards there. You can read these almost as cards. I was sitting here going, I think I could read this, and then on the back side, we have information about each technique. So everything from, psychometry to the clairs to mediumship techniques, sitting in the power, spirit guides. Like, we really sat down and tried to make as cohesive a tool that people could use outside of the classroom to study and get to know and work with their gifts. So I'm honored that he asked me to create this with him. It was really a gift from John to be able to work with him and put this together. And we can't wait for you all to get it soon.
I know. Can you pre-order them now?
They are pre-ordered on Amazon. They will be in your mailboxes around August 25th. It's killing me, Danielle. First-time author, so I'm kind of excited about this for me. But the hard part is waiting for you guys to get it so that I can get the feedback.
I know. Well, I'll post in the show notes on YouTube and on iTunes a link to the Amazon Canada site and the link to the Amazon US site. So non-affiliate links, like I don't get anything from this. Like I'll just like post them so people can pre-order them, because why hasn't this been done before? Don't you ever feel like that? Like something gets created, you're like, holy, like what a great idea. I'm so getting one. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we were even saying that John is like this first of its kind.
Yeah.
When we pitched, it was really exciting because I was part of the pitch to Hay House, and so it's been also a great learning experience to work on the marketing side and develop this deck and to see it come into print. So like to actually have it in my hands. We've been working on this for 2 years, so to see it in your hands with the pictures and the color and the designs. But we're really excited. We hope that it's, while it says the mediumship training deck, intuitive, psychic, you name it, it speaks to all of those aspects. I remember telling John, I think we went beyond mediumship with this in good ways. So we're really excited.
I'm so excited. I just had like this big like light moment where I'm like, Lauren Rainbow, Hay House author, right? Like how cool is that?
I can't digest that yet.
Right? Like that's up there, like really high up in the metaphysical world. It's like Hay House author. You're in the names with like the Kyle Grays, the John Hollands, right? It's so beautiful. I'm so excited for you.
It's amazing. I feel so blessed. And like I said, with John, it was great to work with him in this project. He's brilliant. It taught me a lot. He taught me a lot. We had fun. We're, as friends, we get along very well anyway. So it was a lot of fun and to put it together. And I feel really blessed. But yeah, digesting Hay House author has been like, how did that happen?
You need to update your IG profile biostat, right?
Like, yeah, thank you. I gotta do that. And it's wonderful when you celebrate with someone like this process, because you did call it, because we were bestseller on Amazon. You're officially a best-selling author now.
Best-selling Hay House author. Like it's just amazing. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so excited. And I have to say, like, I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I was so honored the other day. I did a reading for this woman, I think it was like 3 weeks ago. And I always ask people, like, how did you hear about me? Right? Like, was it Instagram or my podcast? She's like, oh, Lauren Rainbow referred you. I was like, Lauren Rainbow recommended me? I was so honored. I was so blown away. I was so touched. And it was actually after I asked you to come on to the podcast. It was like literally the next day.
Beautiful.
And I was so honored. So thank you for thinking so highly of me. So the kudos just like back to you. Like, I'm just so proud to see where you've come. And I mean, you were a big deal to me years ago. So this is just you like leveling up, right? So very, very excited. And so I also really wanted to talk to you today about demonstrations, because we haven't talked about this on the podcast yet. I'm by far not a leading expert in this. So I'll just give you a bit of my background. It doesn't sound like anything like yours. Because I discovered mediumship much later in life. I've always been interested in it. I've lived my life as a real big scaredy cat, like not taking chances. I did take some chances, but I was always like serving with fear. Like even my mediumship, I discovered like last year at some point, I'm like, I feel like I'm serving with like this guise of fear. Like I feel like I'm still scared, and I let go of that fear. I transcended that fear. And that's what I'm so passionate about walking other mediums through. I'm like, look, I've walked through this fear. I know what's on the other side. It's so worth staying the course and just like doing the thing and getting over it. But what freaked me out was demonstrations. And I mean, I'd seen the best. Like I'd gone to Sylvia Brown as a kid. I'd seen John Edwards as a kid. I'd seen, Mavis live and Tony live. And I don't know if you know Aboriginal medium Sean Leonard, but him live, I mean, he's just like, he's next level, right? That guy. And so I, again, was stuck in this comparison trap of like, I'm not anything like that. Right. And so I just late December last year had this moment where I had an astrology reading with my business mentor, social astrology, Natalie Wallstein. And she's like, your astrology is set up for you to work in big groups. And I was like, well, it's funny you say that, because I only do one-on-one stuff, right? Like I am not known to do groups. She's like, you need to be in front of groups. And so this year, my business has been really kind of like growing into group coaching and group programs. And I did my first demonstration of mediumship on the full moon in Leo in February. And I will tell you my process, Lauren, because I haven't had any training in this. I just totally left it to spirit. And I was so terrified I couldn't talk all day, and it's not like me not to be able to talk, right? My husband's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I am so scared right now." Like, I had to lay down throughout the day. I love visualization. I couldn't even visualize a positive outcome or a negative one. I just couldn't even get there. And then at the event, I'm like shaking, putting the chairs together. I had 22 people for my first night, sold out in one day. I mean, it was just like spirit completely like aligning everything for me. I couldn't meditate before. I just like prayed to spirit saying, "Oh my God, like, what am I doing here?" And then I stood up and I started talking, and it was the most magical night of my life. Like, I could like literally cry reliving how I felt up there, and like I get really emotional,
Yeah.
really emotional. And I couldn't sleep for 2 days. Like, I was just so proud of myself, but I know that people had like a really amazing time, and I really surprised myself. And that was the scariest thing I've ever done, you know? I
I
get so
understand.
emotional reliving it.
It's a good though, right? It's what I call spirit high. There's a certain magic that happens in that group setting
Yeah.
when you align with that love of spirit, which is so much more powerful by volume than you experience in a one-to-one.
Yeah. And my clairaudience really opened after that experience. I got names. Like, I was never a medium who really got names, and I got a name there, and I've been getting a lot of names ever since then.
Yeah.
Um, I actually feel like my readings have improved because I'm like, I overcame the scariest thing in this work that I feel, other than probably being on TV, which I don't have any desire to be on TV. But it's like, I just, my whole life changed after that experience. So I did it one more time after that. The second experience was like much the same, where I was like kind of scared. It wasn't as like crazy for me, but I think I had like 3 suicides come through at the very beginning. And so like the energy for me was like quite intense.
Yeah.
So it was different for me, and then COVID happened. I haven't been able to do it since. So I really wanted to ask you, like, explain to the audience, like, how do you prepare to go on stage? Are you ever prepared? Do you ever get unscared? And what is it like for you up there?
That's a great question. I mean, for the first few years that I did DEMS, I've been doing DEMS, over 10 years now. And I was always terrified. I have the quickening. It would give me that feeling of anxiety. I would get nervous. And then you get out there, and it's almost like you have a microphone in your hand, and you start doing your introduction. You're like, I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the spirit comes in, and you land that first link. And then you're like, okay, I got this, right? And what it is I believe that happens inside of us. For me, I want to serve them so well, and I want to get it not right for my ego. I want the messages of love to get out there as best as they can to who they belong to.
Mhm.
And so there's a part of us, I think, that gets so overwhelmingly nervous that is it going to work? Is it going to go? And then once you get the energy of that first link in any DEM, it feels like you can just surrender right into it. And then 2.5 hours go by and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
It took me years to really get to a place where I feel a little less nervous, but I'm still always nervous.
Okay. Good to know.
Um, yeah. Oh no. For me, Danielle, it started off as 20 to 40 people. And one time here in New England, we did a show at my old theater I worked at. I went back for my first show, and it's an 850 seat theater. I know every theater, every seat inside that theater like the back of my hand, because I lived in there for 2 years, and we sold it out. And it was my first ever DEM of that size. And how do you prepare? You don't. You panic. I don't meditate. I'll be honest. I don't meditate much before a DEM. My day of preparation, especially for the bigger of an event like that, the bigger the event, the more I am, quiet throughout the day. I don't have a lot of plans. I don't do a lot of readings. I really want to build my energy for spirit. I want to store it up, because when the bigger the groups that you do, the more energy energy you're going to output.
Yes.
So depending on the volume of the audience that day, like if I'm doing a smaller 40, 20, 50, you know, I might still be a little leisurely, but, you know, but on a big dem day, as I say, we take it easy. You know, it's usually actually a pamper day. If I get ready, I might, you know, right now we're not doing any of that, but like get my, you know, mani-pedi, anything that relaxes me and makes me not think about what I'm about to do.
Yes.
But the first time, Danielle, I always going to tell this funny story, as I was getting ready to go on stage that first sold out night, and they're backstage, you know, it's a big theater. There's a lot going on. I am nervous as hell. My manager is a good friend of mine, and he's getting ready to put me on stage. He's like, do you need anything? I'm like, a bucket. Bucket right now. And he's like, do you really think you're going to be sick? And I'm like, I think so. And I've done theater, Danielle, too. So the other thing is my entire childhood was raised on the stage. My parents were thespians and choreographers. So I lived in the theater. But when you're going out there by yourself to do all of this, it's a whole different experience. And so they get ready, they do the God voice announcement, and they announce my name, and I'm realizing I got to get out there, and I'm just like panicking, and my manager pushed me onto the stage. The next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I'm out here. I gotta make it work. And I say this in a funny way, none of this from ego, but when I got over that moment, Danielle, that was me. That was that, when you have that first dem, that was the one night I always say was my unicorn. Something magical happened. The energy of spirit was so profound. The stuff that was coming through us, you know, it's not of us, it's, you know, the spirit coming through us. And I remember at the end, my manager's going, you got to be done now. He's off to the stage. I'm like, one more? And he's like, no, you've got to be done. I'm like, one more. You know?
You're not done.
Going. I was just in it. I just kept going. The audience was with me. And finally, I got off that stage and I went, who was that? And that to me is what I think is so magical about the more that you do the dems. Really, the point of that story was there was amazing surrender for me in that moment. And I don't remember being me for 2 hours. It was just boom, 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 boom. I get off the stage. And I wish I can make that magic happen every single time. And it doesn't. It comes close. But that's the other part about demming is we, you know, there's from, through, to spirit, right? There's the spirit and there's us. We get our connection. And now you not have one receiver. You can have 20 to hundreds of receivers.
Yes.
It's like John Edward, thousands. I remember seeing Long Island mediums here in New Hampshire, 6,000 people. I'm like, what, right? And so, you know, to me, there's a surrender that happens in the dem. And like you're saying, you get that beautiful spirit high. Like you, I was awake for well over 24 hours after that event. And that's also the other thing is monitoring your energy, because we do move very large volumes of energies for groups like that. Yes. So finding ways to bring your energy back to ground after a dem is also really important. So you're not also wearing yourself out for hours.
So what do you do with that?
What do I do? That's a great thing. I actually do a lot of meditation. That's when I'll do a lot of meditation. I don't sit in the power. I do more of a quieting. Breath work is really important, because the other thing I think that you're learning, Danielle, and a lot of people may not understand as mediums, is our energy is expanding by volume of sitters.
Right. Okay.
Right? So when you and I sit and do a one-to-one reading and the spirit comes in, yes, there's an expansion, right? We're opening our energy, we're light, we're raising our frequency, we're connecting with spirit. So now you're magnifying your receptive audience by however many are there.
Yes.
So that's going to make you expand even more. So as you grow in volume, because you will, your audience size, you will notice the bigger the audience, the more energy you're going to output. Yeah. But there's also a management that we have to have there, I believe, as a medium as well, is that you're now not only managing the energy of from, through, and to, but the to is now magnified by however many people. So while I'm delivering a message to one person, there is still other people in the audience who need to be receiving energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I always say, like, I feel like with DEMS, because I've been to a lot of DEMS too, there's a healing that takes place. There's this like co-created energy that even if you do not receive a message, you don't hear my voice to you, you are receiving a healing, because that is the way spirit works. There's an intelligence there. If they can heal all these people at once, they're like, we will do that, right? So I do feel like there's this like energetic healing that takes place. I felt healed in a DEM where I'm just like, I didn't receive a message, but I'm like, man, I felt the presence of spirit, and that is a gift.
And that's where I think that's that little magic that we have. And that's why you're having a lot of positive experiences from your DEMs. I know when the energy has been really great by the response. I don't need it, but if people are coming back to me saying, I didn't get a message, but that was wonderful, then I know the energy, like you're saying, has been transferred or been received on multiple levels. There are times I walk off a stage though and go, oh, the energy wasn't quite right. And I think it's important that we all know that. I've talked with, again, some of the fellows that I worked with, like Tony and John, and we all have DEMs that you walk off the stage, you just go, oh my God, And that's the hard part about, my manager, we joke, because he works with comedians, and, what we do is not memorized. Every time we walk on that stage, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea who's going to communicate. I have no idea what the night is going to look like.
Yeah.
And then you walk off the stage and you do it again, and you have no idea. So
it's so comforting hearing that.
Yeah, there's a braveness in knowing that, and Tony Stockwell, I love him as one of my mentors, has always said, and I believe this to be true, if you're meant to do this work, the spirit will sustain you. Yes. And I've had DEMs where I've come down and said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
I have heard Tony say that. I've heard Anthony say that. I've heard you say that. And it's comforting, because I always tell my students too, who I teach more one-on-one readings to, and I say, not every reading you're going to feel that really palpable energy of spirit. And I feel like we get rewarded almost with those magic ones that keep us going.
Yes, they do.
Right? Because you're like, I want that again. It's like you're chasing that feeling, because it's
the first time high.
It is. It's like chasing a high. And I know for me, the second DEM for me was a lot harder. Like I had one of my best friends, I made her stay behind. I'm like, talk me down, right? But I received so much more feedback, positive, from that second one than the first one. So I feel even us as the channelers, we experience it completely different than the people observing. And I try to remember that too. It's like, I can't judge the story of what other people are saying about me. I can't even exhaust myself or spend my energy there, right? But I've felt that. And then COVID happened literally a week after my last DEM. So I haven't been able to do it again. And I'm so excited to get back at it, because I just want to sit in that energy again. It was so much fun. A couple things I just wanted that really stuck out for me in your story was, one, there's no certainty in the spirit work. We are literally asked to leap first. We are literally asked to be courageous and just trust the world of spirit. And you've said that. It's like, we don't know what we're going to get in every reading. We don't know what we're going to get in every DEM. And it's like, we can't, there's no certainty in this work, right? And so it's all about courage. And I also tell a lot of my students, like, service is the antidote to fear. So when in doubt, just call upon service. Remember that you're here to serve. So you've already reiterated that as well. And there was something else too that really kind of stuck out for me, but I can't remember. But it was around not every single experience you have is going to be the same. And it doesn't mean that like you're not meant to be doing this work. It just means, like, I think we keep our egos in check when we have these experiences. I also think we need to experience, you can't experience light without shadow. You can't experience like hate without love. Like, we need to have these multi experiences so that we can really appreciate how powerful spirit is and how powerful we are. And then something else that just came to me when you're talking about your story is, like, I love Gordon Smith, like the Scottish medium. Like, he's just so practical. He's so grounded. So I love his books. And I remember this is how bad it is, Lauren. Like, I have all his mediumship development books, and I used to skip over the demonstration chapters because I'm like, I'm never doing that.
You were ready.
I literally would flip over them. And after my first DEM, or after my second DEM, I pulled out his books and read the demonstration chapters, and I underlined a bunch of things. It was quite interesting. I'm like, man, it's so funny how I just like skip over these things. And he says in one of his books that it's like that first experience you have is spirit's way of showing you what you are capable of. So it made sense to me why that first experience, like we both had, like it brings me to tears recalling how magical that experience was for me. And it's exciting to know that, yeah, I mean, that's my highest potential, and I'm okay with that because that was freaking amazing,
And,
right?
and I don't want to, I want to amend that just a little bit. That
Sure.
was your highest potential at that moment.
Mm.
There can be higher potentials, right? And I think that as we work more in our own self-work, and that's the other part about being a medium, I get frustrated sometimes in the development side of mediumship, and I'll just call that out in a sense that I think a lot of people just study only mediumship because they just want to learn how to do the gift, they want to learn how to make the evidence work, and they just want to make money on it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to do the self-work. And being a medium is not a job. It is a way that, yes, I am employed by spirit to serve them, and I do, survive on it. But it's a life work. It is a calling. And if I do not work on myself, if I do not grow myself, my gift will be limited to that one high.
Yeah, I completely agree. I tell my students, I've said it for this podcast, I'm like, the healing journey and the mediumship development journey are parallel. When spirit says you make a declaration, I want to be medium, what they hear is she's ready to heal. Right. And your shadows will come up, your insecurities will come up. It's like, so you have to be okay looking at yourself to be able to step into this work without a doubt.
And I think the other key is to be willing to evolve. Be willing to, I always say that who I was 20 years ago when we started at 9/11, and who I am now as a medium, again, published now, right? Never thought 20 years ago when I did this, that was even a possibility. I started this journey never even knowing I would ever walk on a stage. And I evolved into all of that. And I'm still evolving today. My work itself now this year is going through a whole other evolution. I've taught many mediums in New England for 10 years, and now I'm ready to they're all doing the work now. And so I feel like a mama bear. I remember at first I felt like a baby, and like, I've got so now like they're doing different work that I can now bring myself to do. So I think the other key is to evolve in this as well. And to allow yourself to grow and to always work in love and service, and you'll always be guided well. If there's one thing I do feel truly blessed by, and it's not been perfect journey, Danielle, there's been some struggles in this. The bigger, one of my mentors said to me, the bigger you get, the bigger target you become. And I don't like those words, but I was like, nah, that'll never happen. And like, whoa, there's also the thick skin that is sometimes needed to navigate this world. And it's taken me a while to really grow into that. And it's still a process, but I think that's also really important that as long as you're serving spirit, all the other things that get said about you and around you won't matter either.
Yeah. And I haven't reached that yet. Like, I feel very blessed. I'm going to knock on wood. I've only had one, what I perceive to be a negative comment about me out there, but I'm just like, man, I'm like, I hope I will have to develop that skin one day. I know that that's going to be coming for me, but
and like you, I'm still on the low end of that, but I've seen, some of our teachers go through some interesting things, and, other people making Facebook pages and false accounts and stuff like that. And I just go, it's navigating this safely and healthy. And that's why I say, as long as you're working for your own self-care, and not self-care, but self-development. And that's part of why the journeys happen, is also for me to grow myself as a spiritual being. So it's a selfish thing. I lead the journeys and I guide, ceremonies and things, but at the same time, I'm also growing each time I go there.
I know. I love that. And I think you're so right. And I remember one of the thing that stuck out the most for me, that when you read for me in that demonstration, which I mean, I wish there should be YouTubes of you doing demonstrations, honestly, like you're so good. And
I've got a few little snippets out there. I need to do more.
I know you need to have like a page or something so that we can see them all in like one place, because you're so good at doing these group readings. And I remember you like picking up on my gift. And then you kept saying to me, your grandma's saying you're in the right church, but the wrong pew. Right. And I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. And I felt, to me, that was like into the teaching, because I really found myself in my mediumship when I started teaching. Like, I just feel like my calling is to be like a teacher in this, in a very kind of practical way. And then also I was really scared about considering going full time. I wanted to go full time, but I wasn't like, I mean, I didn't go full time until February this year. That was like one of the scariest things I've ever overcome, was giving up my corporate career to do this work full time. But your reading was really impactful on me with that process. And so, yeah, I just have to say thank you for that. And
Oh,
I had that in my
lovely.
head so many times. I'm like, the right church, the wrong pew. I was like, that is really fascinating. I loved it.
I love that
Um,
too.
well, this has been one of my favorite conversations. I think people are going to have so much to take away from this, especially around, like, even just me selfishly. I'm like, okay, not every dem is going to be amazing. And more I keep hearing, I saw Anthony Maraca and Tony Stockwell do a live on Anthony's Facebook like a month or two ago.
Oh,
And
yeah, I
they
saw that.
both were talking about this. Like, Tony was saying, there's still times I leave her. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Right. And to know somebody at his caliber still thinks this, it gives me peace, saying, okay, like, I am on the right path. And it is normal to still think about things like this, even 7 years in. I'm just a baby. Like, 7 years in is like no time at all still, right? But yeah, it's really kind of comforting. I think that's what the listeners will feel as well.
Keep going. That's why I love when Tony said, if you're meant to do this, the spirit will sustain you. And many times, when I think that I'm done or I've walked away, I met my manager who put me on stage after I gave up. I kind of said, well, I was doing psychic work on the side in mediumship, but I was starved sometimes. I'd have to get a real job because I wasn't sustaining. And then all of a sudden I get this guy who says, let me put you on stage. And we've been working together 11 years and all over New England, in theaters all over the area here. And I'm so blessed because I was like, that was not in my view. I walked away. I said, I never want to do this again, spirit. And then he walks in the box office and says, I'm going to put you on stage. So I went from not doing it to go.
Yes.
And that's what I mean by, like, they kept pulling me back when I didn't believe in myself. And so that's how if you're meant to do this. And I just think keep breathing into your heart. I'm always a person, as you know, Danielle, it's all about the heart. And I can't teach that enough. If you're coming from here, you're in the we, you're connected to the world and what your alignment is in the world, right? And so as long as you're leading from here, your spirit and the spirit will always be there to guide you. It's really amazing.
Love that. That's a beautiful way to end this. And so how can the Spirit School listeners, how can they follow you? How can they work with you? How can they keep on top of what Lauren Rainbow is doing?
Yeah, I'm laurenrainbow.com is my website. My social medias are Instagram, Facebook at Lauren Rainbow Medium. And I do have a YouTube channel that has some of these things. I just got to work more on it, but that's just Lauren Rainbow. So anywhere you want to find me there. I've been doing more online teachings. As you know, we've been kind of online teachings, online DEMs. John and I have got some online DEMs coming up in September if people are interested to get messages from Spirit from us. So they can find all of that. All of the event stuff can be found at laurenrainbow.com.
Yes, and go pre-order the deck. Everyone who's listening to this, I have thousands of listeners a week. I'm like, everybody should be pre-ordering this deck. If you're watching on the YouTube, you can see the beautiful art, but so it's the Mediumship Development Deck. That's what you Google.
Mediumship Training Deck on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay, so, and I will link this all. Look below, get it, order it, support a fellow sister. I love it. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, Danielle.